Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome back, and hey, what an honor for us today to have Paul Batura with us. He's Focus on the Family Vice President, and he wears a lot of hats, and I think he jumps tall buildings and outruns locomotives, but we are delighted to have him with us. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Perry. How about yourself?
Fine. Thanks for being with us. Hey, before we get into our topic, give us an update at Focus on the Family. You guys do so many wonderful things. What's happening there?
You know, Perry, thanks for your kind words. We're coming off of a great debut of a film called The Dropbox that was seen by almost 300,000 people in theaters across America. It tells a story about a South Korean pastor who literally rescues little babies that would otherwise be abandoned and left to die in the streets of Seoul, South Korea. So we're really excited to get the word out there about this one man, and then ultimately encourage people to consider foster care and adoption. So that's probably the highlight that we're most excited about.
You know, it's interesting because I just had Stephanie Fast on, who was an abandoned Korean child at the age of 3 or 4 years old, and her story parallels the Dropbox story, and again, bringing a lot of attention to people to the whole subject of adoption.
It's a wonderful thing to look at a story and look at someone's life years later and to see how their life was changed through the gift of adoption. I'm really glad you had her on.
That's wonderful. Well, Paul, you used to be an umpire?
I was. You know, back in my former life, I played ball as a kid in high school, and was able to become an umpire for Little League, Babe Ruth League, and other smaller leagues in my town. So that was a great way to stay attached to the game.
Well, you have an interesting concern about parents' involvement in their kids' sports, and so often we'll go to a Little League game and watch the kids play baseball on the field while the parents are doing a boxing match in the stands.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little more interesting what goes on in the stands, but I saw it as a young man. I was not a parent at the time. I was 20 years old, and now I'm a parent. I have 3 boys. I coach. I encounter officials like any other coach would. But I'll tell you, it's an interesting, sometimes glaring spectacle to see how parents interact with umpires.
Well, let's talk about that. Why do parents get so emotionally involved in this?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, Perry. I think a lot of it has to do with parents living vicariously through their kids. They remember what it was like to be a kid. Maybe they didn't achieve what they wanted to, or they want to go back to that. And so they get really emotionally invested in the game rather than, just simply encouraging their son or daughter. And that can be pretty damaging. I mean, you find yourself angry at the umpire rather than paying more attention to what your son or daughter is doing on the field. Some parents obviously get exercised about it, but the reality is most keep it in balance. So I don't want to suggest that it's an epidemic that's ruining it for everyone, but we all know that parent. I mean, you don't want to be that parent, who everyone is looking at. Your child is embarrassed because you're the loudest in the stands. It's one thing to be an encourager. It's another thing to be obnoxious. And I think nobody wants to be that obnoxious parent.
All right. So for the sake of discussion, describe a typically out of control parent. What do they look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we all know what they look like. They're loud. They call attention to themselves. They're very critical of not only officiating, but they can also be critical of their own son or daughter. Taking it another layer, I've seen parents who are critical of other kids, maybe kids on their own team. And that is, of course, off-putting, but it's also just unbelievably discouraging to the child. Their own parents not there, maybe, or maybe they are, and then you get into the parental arguments in the stands. I've seen those happen as well. But, the other out-of-control parent, I think, is one who really meddles with the coach. There's one thing to help coach a team. As a coach, I welcome other parents helping out. In fact, if your child is playing in a youth sports league, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the coach. Just because you put your registration fee down and you get your child there on time with the proper equipment doesn't mean you can't be involved. Now, I know there are different levels and there's different expectations, and not every coach is going to be as opening and as welcoming as some might be. But just speaking personally, I love it when other dads say, can I give you a hand? Because practice can be obviously a little chaotic. I don't only have a certain skill set. Other parents come from a background perhaps more applicable to the sport than me. So I love it when other fathers get involved. Mothers, the same deal if it seems right and a coach is open to that. But I think we can look at that and say, this is what we really want. We don't want that loud, obnoxious parent in the stands.
Were you ever abused as an umpire by a parent?
Well, verbally, sure. I was yelled at quite a bit. I mean, I like to think I was a decent umpire. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I made every call correct. In fact, I remember when I was first an umpire, I was calling this game. It was a Little League contest, and I was taking my responsibilities very seriously. And I was calling the balls and strikes. I had a tight strike zone, and the supervisor of the umpires actually was behind home plate, behind the cage. He called me over in between innings, and he said, hey, listen, you got to open up the strike zone a little bit. He said, you're calling this game too tight. He said, the score is 28-27. I think you can, kids are walking around the diamond. So, I've been harassed. I've been harangued. The most memorable incident for me was a parent after a close play that ended the game, followed me to my car and kept haranguing me and asking me, insulting me. And I just didn't want to get into it. And so I just kind of kept my head down. I acknowledged them. They were much older than I was. But I literally had to drive away. I never felt like I was going to get attacked, but it was that venom and that much energy was in it. And I remember at that moment thinking, I do not want to be one of those parents when I'm fortunate enough to have kids. It happens. And, I've thrown parents out of the park, or at least out of the stands. I've thrown plenty of kids out, kids that throw bats and throw helmets and curse. And, that's just not the way you want to play the game. It ruins the experience for everybody.
All right, I got to take a break here, Paul, but when we come back, I'd like for you to share with us the impact that this has on kids, because the kids are sent out there to have a good time. They're trying to learn the sport. They're trying to learn what it is to work as a team. They're trying to take directions from somebody other than the parent. And then the parent preempts all of that with some kind of an outburst. It's got to be pretty impacting on a young person. So I want you to respond to that. We'll be right back with Focus on the Family Vice President Paul Batura in just a moment. Hey, welcome back, and what a delight and an honor to have with us today Paul Batura. He's one of the vice president of Focus on the Family, and they do a great work there, as you know. We've been partners with Focus on the Family for well over 30 years here at theDove, and we consider our relationship with them to be vital in the services that they provide to our viewers and listeners and the work that they do really around the world. And Paul's unique because he's sharing with us today the interesting phenomenon of parents that get a little too uptight or exercise or rambunctious during a sporting event when their kids are on the field playing that. He's been an umpire and a coach, and so he knows firsthand. Paul, first of all, let me ask you this before we get to that question. Is there much of a difference in spotting or dealing with a parent that's somewhat abusive and out of control as an umpire and a coach, or is it still the same kind of thing going on?
Well, I think in general it's more or less the same. I think, it's always a little different based on your perspective. I think as a coach, my concern are my boys on the field. I don't pay that much attention to the parent in the stands. As an umpire, I try to zone out the parents as well, but you can't help but interfere with the game, especially when the kids are responding to the parents, because there's that emotional connection. It's very easy to kind of get that tipping point where if a parent or a group of parents is particularly obnoxious in the stands, that can change the mood of the kids. I mean, it's the classic rule that parents are an example for their children, good or bad, and so a good example in the stands normally translates into a good bench and a good group of kids on the field.
Have you ever had to deal with bullying as a coach?
I've dealt with children who are not the kindest to one another, sure. that kind of breaks your heart. I mean, I like to say I think I have a heart for the underdog. And so you try as a coach to identify the children on your team that might need a little extra tender touch, and you protect them as best you can. But other kids, sure, I mean, especially football, where there is an opportunity for contact, a little less so in baseball. Baseball is more of a verbal abuse. Football can be a little bit more dangerous if the kids are trying to take out their vengeance on one another.
Is one of the standard complaints you're not playing my kid enough?
Yeah, that does happen, and a lot of that is expectation. I mean, I'm of the mindset as a coach that in the younger leagues, especially, I play all my kids as equal as I can, and I set that up with the parents. Often it's a matter of talking with them about where I think their child is best going to perform and is going to have the best success. Not every father wants their son to be quarterback, but a lot do. And you don't want to put a kid in a position where he's going to fail. At the same time, you want to have him have a little experience there, at least to taste it and to see it. But as a coach, that's your job to make sure you put the kids in the right place. But I am not one of those hyper competitive coaches. Winning is not everything, and that's something you try and teach kids very early on. That success is not defined as a matter of winning and losing. It's defined by your attitude, by sportsmanship, and by enjoyment. That sounds in some ways cliche. It doesn't matter. There's that saying, it doesn't matter. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. That's probably the worst philosophy in youth sports. But again, I want to stress that most parents out there are cooperative, but you just have those few who get overly excited and kind of ruin it for everyone else.
All right, let's go to the question, and that is, what damage does this do to the child whose parents is out of control, and even the peer pressure that they may cause among the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that question, I might turn it around and say, you remember, to a child who's had a good parent and a good coach, do you remember them? You think about what that experience was like and how impactful it was on you as a person. I mean, I remember my father very gently encouraging me from the stands. I remember a coach doing the same. I remember those coaches and very fondly. I think they instill confidence in a player. They instill good sportsmanship, a good attitude. Conversely, I think you can really damage someone. You can kill a kid's confidence. You can obviously embarrass them. I like to remind parents that the ride home from the park is sometimes the most important ride of the day, because if you set the tone the first few minutes, you sit back in that car. If you're critiquing your son or daughter and asking them a series of questions, why did you swing at that pitch? Why didn't you cut off the corner? That sort of thing. You're immediately putting the child on the defensive, and you're really setting the tone for future performance, because now they're thinking about it. That doesn't mean to say any critique is bad, but there's obviously a time and a place for it. And a time and a place is probably not immediately after the game, especially if it's a measure of critique.
What about the pregame family huddle? How important is that? So the kid coming out of the car going to the coach, what should parents be saying to their child?
Well, I think that sets the tone. I think you obviously are competing against yourself. You're competing against the past performance. You can't control everyone on your team, and of course, there's different sports have different dynamics. Team sports play a little differently than if someone's golfing, of course, or doing something where you're rated in a gymnastics or something like that. That's truly where you're competing against yourself. But I always encourage our kids to encourage another player, lift them up, both emotionally and even spiritually, to just be that encouraging guy. If you're not in the game, I don't want you sulking on the sidelines. I want you applauding, hollering out, rooting on your fellow teammates. I mean, those are the kids that are sort of the straw that stirs the drink. I love those kids who may not be in the game, but their head's in the game because they're encouraging other players. But the tone, you talk about the pre-family huddle, the tone is set at home. And what our kids are doing is they're watching us to see how we respond to professional athletics, as an example. Are you the kind of person who sits in front of your television on a weekend and yells at the TV, that is mood rises and falls based on the success of your team. Well, if your professional or collegiate team, if that's you, that your child is picking up on that. And what they're seeing is that means a lot to my mom or dad. And so that means I'm going to have to perform in order to satisfy them or to win their approval. If professional sports is an idol in your life, that's going to be probably played out on the field for your kids, because your kids are picking up on that. So you have to be really careful. There's a healthy balance, right, between rooting for a team and having a healthy admiration for another team and making it an idol in your life.
Well, that's solid advice. Thank you, Paul. I've seen some games where a parent gets pretty disruptive, and other parents will shout that parent down. Now what do we do?
Well, yeah, I like to leave that to other parents at times, but I think there is a measure of self-correction in the stands, and that's good. I mean, it's good that parents are there, and it's good that they're kind of self-policing each other. It's not up to you as a coach or even as an official to be the overall arbiter in the stands. I mean, you simply have to manage it, but leave it to the other parents often to take care of things.
All right, Paul, the other question that comes out of this, I think a lot of parents are looking for ways to have their kids involved in something outside of school. And obviously Little League or Pop Warner football, gymnastics, swimming, all of these are opportunities. And yet they're obligations. But how important is it, do you think, as a parent, a coach, an umpire, that kids have something that deals with team effort?
Well, I think it's good. I think it's a healthy type of activity. At the same time, I really encourage parents that don't set goals for your kids. Only your children can set the goals for themselves. Our job as a parent is to counsel, to encourage, to set a vision even for what we want our children to turn out to be. But if you're pushing your child into a particular sport because you want them to play that sport, you're kind of setting them up for eventual disappointment or failure or frustration. That said, team sports is a wonderful outlet. Assuming you have the right group of kids, you're in the right league. I often encourage parents to, don't just sign up for the first league that's out there. The type of skills and the types of, things you learn as a kid can be found in a church league, can be found at the YMCA, and can be found in Little League and more organized sports. But I mean, we all know people, and maybe we are guilty of this ourselves, where sports begins to take over our lives. And instead of having a fun weekend as a family, you've turned yourself into a taxi cab driver, and you're running your kids back and forth, and you're missing church on Sunday because there's an out-of-town game, or you're putting plane tickets on a credit card because the team has a travel event. That's not healthy, and I think you really have to consider the whole family when you consider your child's extracurricular activities. It's good to play, but it's simply play, and those types of skills learned on the field can also be experienced elsewhere, not necessarily in sports, but in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Awana, all those types of activities that as Christians that we want to support.
I think sometimes the other thing we ought to be sensitive to, where we'd like one of our children to say do some kind of a sport because we did it, but they're not interested in it. Where do you draw the line on that? So that you let them be an individual and go in another direction.
I think you really do. I think you can, if you want your son to play baseball and he doesn't show any interest in it whatsoever, I think that's where you test it out in the backyard, do a pickup game, wiffle ball, that sort of thing. When they're young, they're pretty malleable, but as they age and their skills begin to emerge, and certainly their interests, I think you have to let children make their own choices in that regard. I mean, if the alternative is sitting on the couch playing video games, that's not a good alternative. So you have to look at what's the motivation. But I mean, my wife is a terrific musician, And, she played softball, tried it as a girl. She didn't like it, but she wound up going to school with an oboe scholarship. So, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, thank goodness for the diversity of talents with kids. So I do think we have to be careful, and we have to play to our kids' strengths, not to our own. And knowing that difference and finding that difference is key.
This is very encouraging, and I think you serve a lot of parents who are struggling with, what to do, when to stop it, when to get in it, when to get out of it, what to do with they don't become over involved in it. There's a balance to all of this, but boy, it's impacting, because those few years in a young child's life, whether they're involved in sports or not, is pretty critical on how the parents respond to everything.
It is critical, Perry, and I'll tell you this: it goes quickly. I'm still in it, and yet what I hear time and time again, you've heard it too, I'm sure, is that enjoy the time you have with your kids, because you're going to blink and it's going to be over. And I think we have to be very intentional with how we spend that time. Look at the end at the beginning. Where do you want to wind up? Do you want to have regrets? Do you want your children? Where do you want your kids to be? Not every child's going to grow up to be a professional athlete. I think sometimes intuitively we think they will, and that's why we justify all the time we spend and money we spend with them. But the reality is the vast majority of kids grow up to be adults just like us, who have a job and who serve their church and who have a family, and you want that well-rounded, balanced child and or adult, and that starts as a child, and it's up to you as a parent to put them on that right path. But remember, it goes quick, and don't waste it.
I got about a minute left, Paul, and speak to the fact that sometimes these activities with these children in sports, it's a season. It will end. It may not become their career. It's just one of those things in their life.
It will, that's right. And I think some parents might say soccer never ends. At least that's what it seems like in our town. There's always seems to be a soccer season, but it will end. And you live and you play, and again, finding that balance is key. And not making an idol of sports for your kid is important as they grow older. But again, it has a lot of positive benefit, a lot of upside to it. But again, finding that balance, learning how to win well, learning how to lose well, is a great lesson for a young person.
Paul, thank you for your time, and thank you to you and Jim and John, the whole crew there at Focus. You guys are wonderful what you do and the services you provide. Just give our best to everybody, and our partnership with you over these 30-plus years, believe me, we hold it in high regard. Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, Perry, and same to you at Dove TV. We really appreciate what you're doing.
God bless you, pal. We'll see you next time. All right. And again, check out Focus on the Family on the Dove Radio, on the Dove TV. We air all of their things. And, of course, you can go to Focus on the Family website with an incredible amount of resources available to you. All right. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.